Hi folks, welcome to Give Me the Remote. It's the 30th of December, Happy New Year, and we're on episode 27. I'm Sheridan and I'm joined by my co-host...
John, hello! Seamless around here. And it is of course the very tail end of 2018, and we did say the last one was going to be the last of the year, and then...
We lied.
Charlton Brooker tweeted that there was going to be a new Black Mirror on the 27th of December, and we got very excited. And here we are talking about it because we just can't let this one wait, and it probably needs a full 30 minutes all on its own. Okay, let's walk through this a little bit. For those who don't know, what is Black Mirror, Sheridan?
Black Mirror is a show that was created by Charlie Brooker.
Mm-hmm.
Did he write all the episodes?
No.
Okay. So anyway, it's 4 seasons, and it's basically each episode is a standalone episode that's created in usually a future universe that really looks at the impact of technology on our lives, but that's a fairly loose kind of theme. They're very well-written stories that traverse, I guess, relationships and a full gamut of what it is to be human.
Yeah, and look, single episodes of Black Mirror can win more Golden Globes than whole shows.
Yes.
And single episodes have had their rights optioned to turn to full-blown movies by the likes of Robert Downey Jr. So they're very much... they get a lot of attention in quite high-powered circles. And Charlton Brooker's a weird guy. He's been sort of a... enfant terrible of British media for a long time. He can be very critical, very caustic. He's been forced to make incredible retractions and apologies for some of the stuff he's pushed out over the years as well. Including trying to get people to assassinate the president. He feels that was a joke and should be taken as a joke. Lots of people didn't take it as a joke. So that's sort of some insight into Black Mirror. Now, this Black Mirror episode is called...
What is it called?
You're really adding a lot to this podcast, aren't you? It's called Bandersnatch.
Bandersnatch.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then they had promoted at me for 2 days, and I didn't really pay a lot of attention.
Yeah. Now, when you heard the name Bandersnatch, what did that mean to you?
It meant nothing.
Nothing.
Obviously,
at all.
well, I didn't even know what it was or how to remember it.
Okay, whereas to people of a more...
nerdy.
I was going to say English lit.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
No, not at all. So the Bandersnatch first appeared in Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass, which was the follow-up to Alice in Wonderland and the even weirder and even more psychedelic and hallucinogenic. And I really wonder what the hell my dad was doing reading it as a bedtime story to my brother and I when we were quite little.
Well, I think a lot of parents did that.
It's just considered a canon of children's literature,
yes.
Even though it's quite disturbing and very weird. I will going to read now from the poem Jabberwocky, which is a poem inside the book Through the Looking Glass.
We'll indulge you.
'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wob. All mimsy were the borogroves, and the momwraiths outgrabe. Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the Jubjub bird, and shun the frumious Bandersnatch.
Thanks for that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's always quite mysterious what the Bandersnatch is in Lewis Carroll. You never fully glimpse the Bandersnatch. There's also a later poem called Hunting of the Snark, which also features a glimpse of Bandersnatch. So a Bandersnatch is a dangerous but mysterious creature. It should be noted, Through the Looking Glass, which is a mirror. And this is Black Mirror.
True.
Yes.
But for those worried that they're in for some sort of highbrow kind of English lit TV show, I think I can allay you of your fears. And
so you're saying you can watch it without a knowledge of 19th century poetry?
I 100% think you can. And the show is primarily about a guy who is trying to create a video game based on a choose-your-own-adventure book called Bandersnatch.
Yes.
that he finds in his dead mother's possessions.
Yes. Now, look, before we move on to more about the basic plot, we've got to say we actually had a lot of trouble playing this and had our own... They must have even designed it as a Black Mirror moment. Because normally we use our Apple TV to watch Netflix. It's just handy, convenient, does what we want. And we tried to play it, and it just started acting like it had played the show and tried to show us a trailer for the next show and just wasn't playing it. I was like, what's going on? Did I stay up late one night and try and watch it on my iPad?
So the reason why this is important is because this episode of Black Mirror is an interactive
Let
episode.
me tell myself... Oh, you've ruined spoilers!
Oh.
Spoilers of my story.
Sorry.
Anyway, and then I noticed that an email had just arrived from Netflix saying, we notice you've been trying to play this episode and it's only available on the right platforms. And there's sort of a little icon they're putting on of like something being smashed or an explosion, like one of those kapow symbols in comic books, and that symbolises, if you can see that on top of the Bandersnatch graphic, then you're on a suitable platform. And we had some trouble finding a suitable platform because it turned out that streaming it from the iPad, that was not a suitable platform. We haven't used...
But I think a lot of people can. Didn't Netflix tell you to stream it from your iPad?
Oh, I thought they had, but it turned out it didn't want to.
Okay, but that might have been just our setup.
Yeah, and then it didn't want to do... Definitely doesn't want to do Chromecast. We haven't used the Netflix function on our TV hardly at all because the dog ate both the remotes that enable that easily. Hello, dog. She has featured in this podcast before with some unwanted interjections. So we got that going, but it was really awkward because we're having to use the iPad to control the TV and the interactive elements were really horrible like that. And then, thankfully, you remembered that the PlayStation also has Netflix. So we fired up Netflix on the PlayStation and then we had to apply the PlayStation's updates before it would play, and then finally, after about half an hour and some other problems because our internet was diving in and out yesterday, we were up and running. Huzzah.
So it did take a bit of fiddling, which, I mean, I knew... Did you not know that it was an interactive show?
No.
Oh, because that is in the preview, I think. So I knew that was the reason why.
I thought that was just an in-game interactive thing because it is, an interactive game with an interactive game.
That's just blown my mind. I knew the show was an interactive show.
Okay, right.
That was a choose your own adventure.
Yeah.
Before we tried to watch it.
Yeah.
So if you didn't know that, you would be finding this to be really quite odd, as you obviously were, which I didn't quite realise.
Yes, and frustrating, but you can get there, and you will get a very creepy email out of Netflix, which you can show to your friends on social media.
Which for you was really creepy because you were talking about why the show wouldn't work, and then it emailed you and said, "We know the show's not working." Yeah. She was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm in an episode of Black Mirror,"
which is also what the show is about, to compound the creepiness and the weirdness. Okay, so that's us done with the first part. Okay, Sheridan, so what is the basic plot?
So the main character is a guy. His age is a little bit indeterminate, but he seems to be in his sort of early 20s.
Early 20s, maybe late teens.
Maybe late teens. Named Stefan, who is trying to create a video game that's based on a choose-your-own-adventure book called Bandersnatch.
Now, it's set in the 1980s, and I think that's important.
It is set in the 1980s. That is very important to note. So it's it's set in 1984, actually, which is kind of around...
There we go, well, another Easter egg!
They do... This kind of... we've already established that it's an interactive TV show, so you are given choices at certain points in the plot, and you decide where the narrative goes. Sometimes those end up in a dead end and you kind of have to go back and repeat things. So it's shown on the TV quite a few times. I think that he wakes up in 1984 because there's a date that appears on the screen. So it's kind of drummed into you quite a bit. Yeah,
because there are flashbacks into the 1970s when his mother died.
Yeah.
And there are even flash forwards into the present day late in the whole piece.
Yeah.
So
he's trying to create a video game, really, I think probably at that point of when computer games first came out, that it's going into a bit of like craziness. Like They're very popular. They're churning out a lot of games. It's really like, it's probably sort of where Netflix was a couple of years ago, where you could really get anything made on Netflix, and because Netflix were just like, oh my God, we need content.
If only we'd done a show then. But there's also, one of the things I liked is this, they're just starting to depict, because adventure games, in my view, were awful things, but when they're then in computer games around, we still played them. Where you've got to type Walk North, or they constantly reference, there's a book called Look Door Find Key for how to write an adventure game. So you just type, and you end up typing, screw you, Zorg, and it says, I don't understand, screw you.
You needed to buy one of those little walkthrough guides in order to get through the game.
If you brought the walkthrough guide, it ruined the game.
It did.
And also, you frustratingly would go round and round in recursive loops in the interactivity of these games, which you also do watching this show. So it really references the source material there. But also, there was a point which they're just moving out of in this, when to make a computer game, you had to be able to do the art yourself, you had to be able to write the story yourself, and then you had to be able to code the thing yourself. And there were very few people who could do that, which is why the stories of that time were quite odd, because the people who could do all those things were odd. Moving towards a model today where a computer game story writer has no technical skills whatsoever and doesn't need to, and any technical skills they have will be wasted and annoy people. And someone doing the sound engineering in a computer game, or even the sound effects, or they're all different people, different departments. It's much more compartmentalized. Are we necessarily telling better stories in games than we did back then? It's hard to say if that professionalism has actually improved things, but I guess that's for another day. Do you think we've covered the basic plot there?
Yeah, so it's hard to sort of talk about the plot in any further detail. I think no matter what storyline that you go down, it's pretty apparent that he has a mental illness. That's a consistent theme. Mm-hmm. And that mental illness is exacerbated by him trying to create this game. And that's pretty much as sort of far as you can go with describing the plot, because you're going to get something different depending on the choices that you make through the interactive element.
Yep. Now, it's worth noting that as far as we can tell, you will, if you keep watching, end up recursing through all the possible choices, or at least a very large number of them. So don't fret too much that you're missing out on some story. Once you get to the end of one story, it'll take you back to the last fork and move you back around.
That does appear to be what it does, yes.
Yeah. We're not going to play it from complete scratch again, because it gets a little dull when it's taking you back through that. But there's also some stress, like, are we on a new path, or are we just doing a path we've done again? And then it's like, oh, hang on, this bit's new, or maybe you just notice things for the first time. It's the most complicated thing to watch I've ever watched.
It does do something quite clever, though, when it takes you back to a previous decision choice and makes you do it again. It kind of does this, what would you call it, like a fast-forward-y kind of... It'll show you, you don't have to rewatch the entire story that's the same.
Sometimes it doesn't.
Mostly, though, it kind of shows you the highlights of the plot that you've already sat through. So you remember, because it actually also gets really confusing, because when you're constantly watching through and then going back, you kind of get really lost in where you are in the timeline.
Yeah.
So it kind of shows you these highlights, so you remember, oh, okay, well, that happened, then that happened, then that happened. Okay, now I'm at the new bit that I haven't seen before.
Yeah.
That's quite clever.
Yeah. Now, one thing I just want to throw the question out there. If you're a Black Mirror fan, is this a Black Mirror episode?
I think it's definitely a Black Mirror episode.
But it's almost entirely set in the 1980s, and none of the technological questions it's asking are new or novel.
Well, actually, I'm not sure that I agree with that, because it is about the impact of technology on us and its ability to control you, and, it's hard to sort of talk about it without giving away the plot, but
okay.
Or the spoilers.
But I guess the Black Mirror, the modern Black Mirror component is the fact that it's making us interact with the thing, and it's even sending us emails about why it's not going to let us watch it. So it was the Black Mirror episode on this side of the screen in our living room.
It's not the first Black Mirror episode to be set in the past, though.
No.
The one with the lesbian couple that... Although I guess that is technically set in the future. They just meet in a simulation that's in the past. in order to have their romance. Well, I don't think... Yeah, I think it's a Black Mirror episode.
Okay, I agree. Well, it says Black Mirror on the tin. The Black Mirror people made it.
It feels like a Black Mirror episode to me.
Apparently, they put a whole year's worth of work into it, and for that, I'm like, oh, so we could have got like 4 normal episodes of Black Mirror instead of this.
I have to say that I'm in two minds about that because I think it does. This is actually something that's really unique to TV watching.
Yeah.
This has not, to my knowledge, been done before, and if it has been done before, it has not been done well.
Yeah, it has been done before, but I will agree with not well and not particularly acclaimed or noticed. Yeah.
This is done. The transitions
for
what you pick
incredible.
Are extremely seamless. Like it doesn't. There's no pausing or clunkiness. It's completely seamless visual.
They do. Watching it with that eye, particularly this morning when we knew we were going to talk about it, they very cleverly have dialogue jump cuts at those moments.
Yeah, they do, yeah.
So
you don't really notice that until after you've had 6 choices.
But it creates a seamless edit, and a dialogue jump cut, where you get the camera moves from one person's face to another person's face is a necessary part of filmmaking.
Yeah.
So, hooray for them. It's just very cleverly done. But it absolutely seamless. Yeah, there's no load screen stuff going on. You're just making the choice before the countdown happens, and then it's carrying on. And I don't even... Netflix engineers must have been tearing their hair out trying to get this to work for every turkey on the planet. Even if it caused us a lot of grief getting it going at this end.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think it probably is worth it, but I think there are better Black Mirror episodes.
As a Black Mirror episode.
Yeah, better stories and better characters and, I mean, there's so many Black Mirror episodes that are just, they make you feel so uncomfortable. And that to me is one of the most significant things you can do in a TV show, is because that is the most awkward feeling, and to elicit that from someone, I think, is brilliant. And that's what a lot of them do. Mm-hmm. They make you some of them make you want to stop watching the episodes. They make you feel that uncomfortable, and you can actually understand how the current world could move to a place that they're portraying in their episodes, and that's brilliant.
Yeah.
This doesn't do that for me.
Well, except for when it suddenly makes you... What it does succeed in that normally Choose Your Own Adventures and interactive games don't, is it actually makes us, as the people sitting on the couch, not just feel, but be directly involved with what's happening on the screen.
Yeah. And that is a new experience.
Not entirely a pleasant one.
No.
But as experiences
go... actually, now that I'm talking it through, actually, I did not like it in sometimes. And, I mean, you're coming off, 3 days of Christmas craziness where I'm sure everyone spent too much time with their families and eaten too much and drank too much and spent too much time stressing out. And the last thing I wanted to do was sit there and make decisions that sometimes were really crappy choices. Like, there was 2 crap choices. And I didn't want to do that.
One thing I never understood
so that's awkward.
Like a really common choice is pour tea over the computer or destroy the computer. And I felt like that was 2 choices that meant the same thing. And
there were a lot of choices that meant the same thing.
Yeah, the cultural significance of some of those things I think was lost on me. Even as someone who's lived in England for long periods of time and has an English family, I felt some Englishisms in there that I wasn't quite understanding.
But I mean, there was even choice like flush meds or throw meds away. I mean, the ultimate outcome of that is he's not taking his meds.
And he really should.
He really should. But, yeah, so some of those choices, I mean, maybe that's what they were trying to do, is just deliberately make you feel like you're kind of making 2, crap choices.
Yeah. Now, let's go back a little bit. One thing this has... in a really big way is Easter eggs from earlier Black Mirror episodes. There's a huge amount of fan service here, possibly because they made us wait a whole year with no new content except this. So we definitely needed some nods to the past. Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, some of that stuff's kind of lost on me. That's not really how I watch TV shows, especially TV shows that are standalone episodes that have no consistent characters or narrative, or even
they're not placed in the same worlds.
Well, apparently, because I've never noticed a Black Mirror Easter egg in another Black Mirror episode, but apparently to the fans, if you want to dive on Wikipedia, there are quite a few that they normally do. And there is even a group of fan theorists on Reddit that have managed to piece together a consistent narrative that this could all actually be one continuity.
Right.
But
I definitely don't watch TV like those people.
But as a viewer, normally you treat each episode as a discrete standalone. And some of the things like you were mentioning the San Junipero episode before where people, it turns out, are in a simulation of the 80s for a while. There was a St. Juniper's church prominently in this, which is...
which you picked up, which that's just too... I mean, if I would pick that stuff up...
Who's got the degree in film studies here?
Well, that's not... I mean, if I really wanted to do... but if I wanted to do that, I would have to sit down and watch the show for that purpose. I watch TV to relax. I don't watch TV to...
write a thesis.
Yeah, if I was gonna, I would pick it up.
Here we are doing our masterwork.
I know. Maybe I should start watching TV. Well, I wasn't watching the first 3 seasons of Black Mirror like that because we weren't doing a podcast.
Sure.
But yeah, there's a symbol that appears in the episode that what would you describe it? It looks like a fork, I guess. It's the symbol from what's the episode called?
White Bear.
White Bear, which was season 2. Yeah. Episode 2, I think.
Maybe.
I just rewatched it, actually.
It's just White Bear. But the interesting thing with the symbol is, firstly, normally the choose your own elements, this are two sets of words. And then suddenly it throws you a Netflix logo and this logo that has no other context. Now, as someone who remembered White Bear particularly well, I was like, oh my God, it's White Bear. You didn't remember it that well.
Well, it's because this is how I watch TV. So I saw it as being... constant. So because it's a choose your own adventure, he's mapping out the story and he does a little fork for where the story branches off, and I was like, well, that's what that symbol is.
But the White Bear logo itself is a perceptual one because it's either you see the white lines that form the fork, or you're looking at the black bits that form the eyes and the nose of the bear. And so it can be that itself can be seen in 2 radically different ways and have radically different meanings as a result. I also noticed just today driving home from doing shopping that a merge lane symbol on the road sign is also the same logo, and that's the reversed meaning because it's saying 2 choices are becoming 1 instead of 1 choice is becoming 2.
Yeah.
So it's getting pretty deep.
Well, it has a lot of meanings, but I think probably you don't need to be able to identify all the Easter eggs to get enjoyment, because I actually found it quite enjoyable to have found the reference that was already in the show that I was watching that you didn't pick up. And that's, that would be how I would watch shows, but I just watch them as standalone.
Within the same continuity. Now, I'm just going to read... Colin is one of the more marvellous characters in this, and he's a more experienced game designer who offers wisdom, guidance, commentary, but sometimes he can definitely lead our hero down the wrong path as well. He's a very interesting character. He's designed to be a cool cat. He's got the coolest house in the whole thing. I'm just going to read the quote. "The whole thing's a metaphor. All he can do is consume. He's pursued by demons that are probably just in his own head, and even if he does manage to escape by slipping out one side of the maze, what happens? He just comes right back in the other side. People think it's a happy game. It's not a happy game. It's an effing nightmare world, and the worst thing is, it's real, and we live in it." And for those who don't get it, that is a reference to Pac-Man.
Yes.
But it's a reference to our own lives. It's a reference to what we're seeing on screen. And they break the fourth wall quite a lot. We won't go into why, but they break the fourth wall.
Yeah, they do. I mean, to be honest, it's also a bit of probably a reference to the Choose Your Own Adventure, which I have to say, because we did sit through all of them, well, what we think is all of the possible options.
We got all the way where it stopped just showing credits at the end, and it actually dumped us out into the Netflix logo, and we think that means you've done it all.
And I found it quite tiresome, I have to say, by the time I felt a little trapped in the story.
Well, you just didn't know where the end point was and how much more we had to go, and sometimes you're looping around through things you've already seen, and sometimes it's like, oh, wait a minute, this is new.
And also, because I guess I'm kind of stuck, at least, in the first story that I watched, which I found quite enjoyable. But that was quite a realistic story.
Mm-hmm.
In that it didn't have sort of it was something that would happen in 1984. There was nothing surreal going on. But some of the stories turned to be quite sort of fantastical and...
Well, there's a swamp monster that appears in one story. There's one where his psychiatrist turns into a ninja attacking him with extended daggers.
And so when I was seeing those, I was a bit like, this has just turned really weird.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'd have seen that the first time around...
That would have been the story.
That would have been it for me. And I was like, okay, well, this is a weird show I'm watching. So this kind of mixture of fantastical versus realistic narrative structure I found very not disconcerting, but I found it actually frustrating by the time I'd cycled through the whole of the story. And I felt like a Pac-Man that I couldn't get out.
Just when you think you got out, it pushes you back in again.
And actually, one of the quite disturbing things, which maybe makes me think we didn't see them all, is the little Netflix bar that tells you how far you are through a show.
Through a show, it's slowly like a
so when because we watched it last night thinking we were going to watch a movie length kind of thing, and we probably watched for what, do you think 2 hours?
Yeah.
It wasn't an extreme amount of time, but 2 hours.
And we were through the main story and it felt quicker, but probably 90 minutes.
Yeah. And when we turned it off, the little Netflix bar was only looked like it was 5% full. And I was like, oh my God, this is terrifying. Do I have to watch all this? But then we got up today and watched the rest of it.
As far as we know.
And that was probably another hour, do you think?
Yeah.
We should have really timed it, but I didn't really think it was going to go on so long. So I think you're probably looking at a full 3 hours.
There was an early major fork that we just haven't explored when you have to choose between Wheaties and rice bubbles and Wheaties, and we went... Sorry, Frosties. We went the Frosties path.
I have my sense
that might not be that important.
Doesn't go anywhere.
Maybe it does. I don't think it does, because we're going to talk now a little bit about interactivity, and is it the future of television? And do you think... I mean, we're definitely going to see a few more things like this.
It's definitely going to see more things like this.
But I don't think it's going to replace...
It's not going to replace...
a proper movie.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page here.
Yeah. But the reason is, fundamentally, even in computer games, which in theory can be total open sandboxes and you can explore everything, creative people have to spend a lot of time and a lot of money making all those little experiences. And what's the point in doing that if the average purchaser of the thing is only going to experience a 1% of the wonder that you've expensively created?
I think there must be an economic argument to why this is not going to be a common thing that we're going to see.
Well, we could have had 5 Black Mirror episodes out of it instead of one weird one.
And Netflix could have had us watching, well, maybe, I guess 5 Black Mirror episodes is 3 hours, but I don't think every single person is going to watch the entire 3 hours of this thing.
I think a lot of them
I think a lot of people will, but, and I think what will happen, it'll be like 3D, to some extent.
Oh, there'll be a few, bunch of them get made.
And then you'll get some really rubbish ones, and it will kind of make people not trust in it. And so you're going to have something really, really good to get people to come back to it.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll never see another one again. I don't know.
I think it's guaranteed we'll see another one.
But I think we will.
It won't replace traditional storytelling, because fundamentally I want a great storyteller to tell me a story, be it listening on a podcast, or be it watching it in a movie, or going to the theatre, or even just a music video. What I don't want is me to be making uninformed half choices midway through that have profound effects I don't understand when I'm making the choice. I find that really unsatisfying.
Yeah. And I guess it probably does come down to what your style of watching TV is. And I've already, confessed to everyone that my style of watching television is to be somewhat passive. And that
possibly noodling on a second screen. Which is okay.
I actually try not to do that so much. But that's to me is an indicator too when I'm not enjoying a show, is when I'm getting my phone out and starting to check. But I do like to sort of passively watch because I find it to be it's a recreational activity for me.
We're supposed to enjoy it. There's no exam at the end of this. Yeah,
so I don't want to have to make decisions. I certainly do not want to have to make decisions that are really uncomfortable to me, because I think when you're given that choice between the meds And I think this is an okay one to talk about because there are other choices that are very uncomfortable. But I found that quite uncomfortable to actually... because it was forcing me to make him not take his medication. And I didn't like that.
There was no choice there to take your meds. And we really feel that should
I was
have
like,
been a choice.
I don't want to make this guy not take his meds. It feels like he really needs to take his meds. And I didn't... That made me uncomfortable. And it was no longer a relaxing experience for me. It was something different, which was ultimately, I think, enjoyable is not the right word, but rewarding. It was a rewarding experience. But I'm not sure I would want to have that experience very regularly.
Yeah, and also just not being able to figure out how much time you need to allocate is something that's going to be problematic in the future with these things.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people being faced with, here's something that might take between 1 and 5 hours, and it's not going to be the quality of Black Mirror, I'm going to say pass. I'll watch something where I know I can resolve my story in 90 minutes. Thank you. Or 2 hours 20 or whatever it says it is from Go to Woe. And how do we feel about the depiction of mental illness in the show?
I mean, in many ways, there was nothing new here about his mental illness. It was a little unclear whether his mental illness was... Well, actually, it probably wasn't that unclear. It was one of those sort of examples of where mental illness was being blamed for all of the negative.
There's 2 major characters in this thing, and they're both very dangerous.
Yes. And any discussion of mental illness is framed very, very negatively. I mean, it's a bit hard because, mental health care in the 80s, which is when this was set, was quite different to what it is today, and I guess public perception of it and how you treat it. So I felt like it was it was an unhelpful portrayal of mental illness. And it was a bit unclear as to what his mental illness was, actually.
Yeah, there is also the issue that the guys who had all the skills to make these things, and this was long before translated computer languages, that when you type them, most people have typed some HTML, it's human readable, it's, angle bracket div or something, whereas this was code, it was characters and numbers, and very few human beings have the wherewithal to write in that, and they're mostly quite strange people who are either damaged by it or were damaged to begin with. I mean, it's odd people who are able to write in that sort of software to begin with.
I'm not sure I have any real hard evidence to back up that.
But there's also...
Well, actually, this is the problem with this portrayal, is it actually does that whole thing of conflates mental illness with this creative genius concept, which I think most people would know is quite unhelpful to treating mental illness, and is probably not even all that true. It's a myth.
There's probably a difficult line between an unusual brain that thinks differently to others and a damaged brain. And I admit that just a second ago I was ignoring that line, so I apologise for that. Okay. But a brain that thinks differently can create artwork that challenges people in new ways, but there's a difference between thinking differently and
being in
disorder.
Danger to yourself and others.
And being a danger to others, yeah. And they really mash all of those together in this.
Yeah, it was not a very nuanced portrayal of mental illness. But then actually it's funny because we just happened to go through, I think, a story the first time around where his mental illness was the main focus, whereas there are definitely storylines where it wasn't. I mean, it's always there, but there were storylines where he wasn't delusional or crazy, and in others he is. So I'm not sure if you have a different perception of the portrayal if you went through a different storyline.
Could well be.
Because I feel as though the story that I feel that in many ways the story I'm reviewing is the first one I saw. Because that was the first complete movie that I watched. And then you're never really watching a full movie again. You're just watching a snippet.
Fair enough. Anything else you want to say about this one? We've been rabbiting on quite a while.
No, I think it's in many ways a bit hard to rate, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to give it 5 stars because I think it does do something that I've never seen before, and it does it pretty well.
Yeah, I was initially thinking 3 stars based on simple enjoyment, but I don't think it was ever intended to be enjoyable. No Black Mirrors truly are. And I'm going to give it 5 stars based on the fact that it's got us talking for over half an hour continuously about it. And I think for anyone else out there, trust us, we've not. There's a lot we haven't touched on.
It's so hard to talk about this without giving spoilers, and there's a lot of spoilers because there's so many endings.
There's plenty in there. It's a real meaty experience, and we really do recommend you check it out. Give it a go. All right, folks, we'll be back in the new year. Have a good one.
Thanks, folks.